Let me just kick things off by welcoming everybody and wishing everyone a happy New Year. It's hard to believe we're almost a month into the new year already. For those that don't know me, I'm Lou DiVincentis. I'm the current president of OHSPRA, and I work for the Orange City School District. Thank you for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to what Greg has to share with us. I also want to thank Final Site for sponsoring today's Lunch and Learn. And I also want to thank Carrie Basson, Mary Bedell, Melinda Briggs and Crystal Davis for their efforts in coordinating today's event, from organizing to publicity to sponsorships. They really did a nice job. So thank you all. Quick reminder, we've extended our award deadline. The new deadline for submissions is January 31st. If you go to our website, you can send your entries in. I will post the link in the chat in a second here. And with that, I'd like to introduce the OHSPRA's Director of Professional Development, Carrie Baston.
Thanks, Lou. Welcome, everybody. As some of you know, I'm the Community Relations Coordinator for Kettering City Schools, and as Lou said, the PD Director for OHSPRA. And we are so pleased today to have one of our favorite people and a consummate school PR professional, Greg Viebranz, here to present for us. Let me give you just a little bit of background. Greg is a veteran communications professional. He is in his 33rd year of school communications. He's got me beat by a couple of years there. Viebranz served 2 separate terms as president of NSPRA Ohio, which is what the name of our organization was prior to our rebranding as OHSPRA. Greg is the recipient of numerous local, state, and national honors, including the NSPRA Gold Medallion Award, the NSPRA Ohio Crystal Award, and the 2020 OHSPRA Innovator Award, which recognizes professionals who have introduced or utilized new methods of communication to dramatically advance or impact school PR locally, statewide, or nationally. So welcome, Greg. Greg is going to be talking to us a little bit about communication audits, and we are looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Greg. So take it away, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely, Carrie. Thank you so much. And so many familiar names from over the years. As Carrie said, this is my 33rd year in this business. It's kind of neat to see how this profession has evolved, because I entered the profession right out of college when it was actually, I would say, rare for a school district to have an individual, let alone a department dedicated to communications. And now it's probably a little more unusual to see a school district that doesn't have someone with at least some hint of communication responsibilities in their job description. So it's really been neat to see how this profession has evolved. And I won't share all of the other boring stuff about me, because I'm here to hopefully impart some information that you can use in your professional choice here. So I am going to share my screen and we will get started. All right. Everybody have the full screen of the presentation there? All right, good deal. So the first thing I thought it would make sense to start with is just a little bit about what a communications audit is. And this is not a scholarly definition or anything out of a book. This is me. This is what I view a communications audit as. And I see it's an evaluation of your current communication initiatives. It's the identification of perceptions about communications from some of your key constituencies. And it's also the assessment of your communication needs. The logical step after conducting a communications audit is to use it to create a new communications plan, or you can use it to inform revisions to any existing communications plans or initiatives that you may have. And the nice thing about this process is it can be done for an entire school district. It can be done for an individual school, could be done to improve communications at a particular grade level, such as your high schools or your middle schools, could be used for special programs or any new academic or operational initiatives. So communications audit really does have a wide-reaching impact on your district as a whole, or you could narrow focus it to a specific need. A little bit about the department here in Westerville. The department consists of myself as the Executive Director of Communications and Family Engagement. I have 2 coordinators in my department as well. I have a coordinator of family engagement who really is our content generator, manages social media, works with video production. So I'm fortunate to have that position. And then I also have a visual communications coordinator who is the person who maintains our website, a lot of the other electronic communications tools that we use, and has been with me really this entire 15 years. And some of you know him, Matt Davis. So Matt has been here since we formed this department 15 years ago. Formed in 2006 on the advice of some long-term community members who had some influence and still do in the community. They were talking with the school board back then. The district was having some difficulty passing some ballot issues. And they got the attention of the board and they were like, you're a multi-million-dollar operation and you don't have a dedicated department for proactive communications. You need to make that a cornerstone of your next levy promise. You need to say that you're going to put a focus on communications. You're going to increase the transparency of your operations. And this is going to become something that is really a focus for this district. And they were very specific that the funding for my position and the funding for one of the other positions in my department was part of that levy ask, and it passed. And I was fortunate to be the person chosen to build this program from the ground up for Westerville City Schools. Way back then and throughout, because I have tweaked and updated it periodically, but the communications audit really provided the initial foundation for our communications plan. And as I said, that continues to evolve over time with ongoing research and feedback initiatives. The basic components of a do-it-yourself audit: focus groups, an assessment of your current initiatives, and a department situation analysis. I consider these to be the must-have components if you're going to do an audit yourself, while also trying to keep your costs under control. So let's talk a little bit about one of those components, and that's our focus groups. When I did the initial communications audit for the district, I held 11 focus groups with the following target audiences. Obviously, parents. That's an important group. You'll see that there's a couple of options there. You could do a district-wide random sample to try to get people to participate, or in Westerville, we have an organization called the Westerville Parent Council. These are already engaged and active individuals, and so I was sure to include them and have representation from them in this process as well. So you know your community's best, you know your parents best, but definitely make sure you have parent representation in one form or another. I did a focus group with classified staff. We brought in some of the community business professionals, our building level administrators, our principals and assistant principals, brought them in for a focus group. We had senior citizens come in for a focus group. We talked with the Board of Education members, central office administrative assistants, elementary teachers, secondary teachers, central office administrators, and community leaders. Those were the ones that I focused on. Your list could be bigger or smaller, depending again on what you need to measure and who you need to include. One thing I would suggest is remain flexible, because a couple of those focus groups that I had actually came about later on in the process. I had really started off with about 8 or 9 that I originally identified and thought, boy, I should really talk with this group. I should really talk with this group. And so feel free throughout the process. If you're getting the sense that there's some more information that you need to try to pull out from people, expand your focus groups, have a couple more, have a couple of other audiences that are brought in. You just want to make sure you're trying to be as thorough as possible. The one thing that I tried to do was limit the size of my focus groups to no more than 12 participants. Because you're really, the purpose of your focus group is really to listen and take detailed notes. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But if you get more than 12 people in a group, it can sometimes become a little arduous to stay on top of the conversation, particularly if they start dialoguing amongst themselves. But your job during the focus group is really to guide that conversation with prompts and just listen. Take notes, capture those nuggets that you hear from them that you know are going to impact your future communications or tweaks to existing communications plans. Some possible items to measure during your focus group. What's the current reputation or public image of your school district? Identify those strengths of your school district and areas for improvement. How do the participants in your focus groups obtain information about the district, and what's their preferred source of information? This one to me is critical. We might think we know what people want to hear and receive, but you don't know if you're hitting the mark unless you ask them. So measure if they are receiving the information that they want and that they need from the district. Ask them point blank, how could communication be improved? Do that with both your internal and your external audiences. And then get their perceptions on what they think the greatest challenge is facing the school district, because that can help you identify some of the topics or information, and in some cases misinformation, that needs to be addressed as part of your messaging and communication planning. And then obviously the all-encompassing miscellaneous. Again, you know your district better than anybody. What are those things that you would like to measure and identify from your focus groups? So after your focus groups, you're also going to want to, and it doesn't have to be after, it can be concurrent. This is another part of the overall audit. You're going to want to do an assessment of current initiatives. And that's going to be at the district level and also the building level. So what is it that you're already doing at the district level? And then drill down to that building level, work with your principals to identify what's happening down there. You're going to want to find out what they're doing in terms of print communication. What are they doing in terms of electronic communication? You're going to ask for samples and see if they can get you some of the information that they're putting out. You're going to just kind of give it a look for overall quality, identify opportunities for improvement. And you're going to do that building by building. So you're going to really take a close look at what they're producing and offer your support to those buildings when you have some of those glaring things that just stand out. You're going to have a continuum. You're going to have those schools that are doing just exceptional and you're like, man, hands off, I don't need to do anything. And then you're going to have some where you can see that they're struggling or they need some guidance or they need some assistance, but always offer yourself as that expert and professional that can help them and guide them along the way. You're going to want the principal's self-assessment of communications and engagement initiatives, both internal and external. So I had put together a questionnaire that I've asked principals to answer, and this continues to help kind of inform any changes or additional information and messaging that we need to support them on. We talked about the principal's self-assessment being both internal and external. So the evaluation tool that I used or asked them to complete measured these types of initiatives. What's their ability or the process that they have in place for staff to share any ideas and concerns? What are the communication vehicles and methods that they're using to reach their staff, their internal audiences? How does their staff typically receive district level information? I know sometimes we lean on our building level administrators to help convey district level information in addition to sending it out directly. So this kind of gets to that question, how do they prefer to receive that information? Do they like hearing it from their direct supervisor? Do they like receiving it from the district? So get your building level administrators' perceptions on, or self-evaluation, I should say, on how their staff prefers to receive that information. I don't miss the opportunity to see if they have an interest in any communications or customer service professional development. They may have a need at their building, particularly you'll see sometimes with customer service, but that's one of the presentations I have ready to go at a moment's notice. And sometimes we'll get those building levels. Can you come out and help my staff a little bit with working with the public? So don't miss that opportunity to see if they're interested in having you come out to help them improve their communications or customer service through professional development. And then another catch-all question: how could the district, how could you as the communications professional support building level leadership in planning and meeting their communications initiatives? Then we move on to the external. How are they reaching their target audiences? Do they create and distribute traditional school newsletter? Do they have an electronic newsletter? How is it that they are communicating with their families and other external audiences? Do they offer any outreach or assistance for new families, whether that's at the start of a school year or a new family moving into their school attendance area during the year? Their responsiveness to questions and concerns. Do they have personal goals established for responding to emails, for returning voicemail messages? The last time I did this with my principals, which was actually just recently, I'm kind of in the midst of a refresh here, but every single one of them had a personal goal that they try to respond to emails or voicemail messages within 24 hours. And only one of the principals said, you know, it really depends on what they're looking for. But they do try to at least let them know, hey, I just want to let you know, I got your voicemail message. I'm working on it. It might take me a few days to get back to you. What available feedback mechanisms do they have in place for their external audiences? Do they have a means of engaging their families and other external audiences to get their feedback periodically and guide their communications and messaging? What types of volunteer opportunities do they have to bring people into their school? And then finally, do they have any business partnerships? Some of this you'll be able to help them with. Some of it, it's really just to have that global idea of what's happening in those buildings, and to see if there are opportunities for you to be able to support them in any way. The third component that I mentioned is a department situation analysis. When I was hired by Westerville, a little more history than you probably need or want to know, but it kind of helps frame what I was coming into. There was not a dedicated department, but there was an individual who was continuing at the time when school districts were still required to produce an annual report and had some other things. This individual was still putting out some news information, news releases and information, and doing those required publications, including a calendar. But it was not what I would call a proactive approach or methodical approach to message identification, developing communications tools, putting in two-way communication opportunities. So I did have that one position when I was hired existing, and then I was able to hire that second position. It was my visual communications person. So that was all part of my department situation analysis. I knew I had one employee who had been in the district and supporting some minimal communications efforts and would be part of my department moving forward. So what are those strengths and areas for opportunities for improvement within your department? What are the opportunities to enhance the work of you as an individual, the department as a whole? If you're fortunate to have a staff, you know, those individuals who are working for you, how can their work be enhanced? Are there external events or situations that could hamper your work? And then what are the needed resources to achieve your work, and do any of those resources already exist elsewhere? I'm very fortunate to have an individual in my department who's very skilled with video production. I've done video production in the past, and for anybody who has done that, you kind of have an understanding of how it happens and how long it takes. I think some people just think, oh, here you go. Wow, a video is magically done. And there's a lot of work to put together a video. I pull that out only because when I say, do these resources already exist elsewhere? If you're a one-person shop and you don't have video production skills, check with your high school, even check with your middle school. Is there a student, is there a parent that's out there who has this talent or ability that you might be able to call upon when needed for 1 or 2 videos a year? So always make sure that you're evaluating what's existing and what's out there elsewhere. Doesn't always have to be within your department. So you've done your focus groups, you've done your department situation analysis, you've looked at the resources. How do we pull all of this together? You're going to want to put together a report of your findings and recommendations. The written report that I produced had these components. It included a project overview, which summarized the goals of the audit, emphasized the research that was done that created the foundation for the improvements being recommended moving forward, and then the scope of the project, what all was done, who was involved, what did your communications audit entail. Include the methodology and the research questions that you asked. That would be the prompts that you used for your focus groups, as well as when you asked your principals to kind of do that self-assessment of what's happening down in their buildings. You're going to, this is really the legwork before you get to this written report. Key findings and emerging themes. Obviously, when you pull all of this information together, you're going to have to dive into it and take a look at, what am I hearing? What am I learning? What are the resounding themes that I'm hearing from within a particular target audience? You may be hearing some themes come through from your classified support staff if you have a couple of focus groups there. You might be hearing some themes that are common across all of your focus groups, and you're hearing it from your principals in their self-assessment. When you have something that comes across, and I'll give you an example. The one thing that stood out when I did ours was people were really looking for improvements to the website. And so that became a priority for me when I was first hired. So you may find those things that people just hone in on and you hear over and over again. That can help you identify messaging, that can help you identify priority projects. After you have all of those themes identified, what are your recommendations and strategies for addressing these things that you've heard? Again, it can be messaging. What are those key messages that we need to get out? What are the strategies that we can use to improve communications with these audiences or engagement with these audiences? Summary of the focus group perceptions. We talked again about those themes. What are those themes within groups? What are those themes across groups? You're going to want to make sure you have a good detailed summary about what you heard from them. And then I had an appendix that shared the results of my department situation analysis and a brief summary of principals' self-assessment. One of the things that I wanted to do and requested was to give a presentation to the Board of Education of the audit findings and all of these recommendations for 2 reasons. Number one, you're an employee of the board. They just make this, or they continue to make this investment in you. So you want to show that you're they're getting their money's worth out of you. And the second thing, really, it's an added accountability for you personally. I knew that when I stood up in front of that Board of Education and put all this information out there, I was going to be held accountable to make sure what I said happened. So it was really a good professional opportunity as well to hold myself accountable. So pulling it all together, after you have gone through, done your communications audit, you're going to use your findings traditionally, to create a new communications plan or make changes to any existing plans. The structure that I continue to have and put in place at the time for communications plan, what are the plan parameters and tenets that you're going to follow in your communications initiatives? Three of the ones that again, just high level. Communications plan is based upon identified best practices in educational communications. This communications plan will be evaluated annually and its effectiveness measured periodically. And the communications plan will be grounded in data gathered and feedback received during the comprehensive communications audit. So just those high level statements, what are the parameters? What are the tenets that drove you to create this plan? What are your goals and strategies within the plan? Who are those key audiences and publics that you are going to reach with this plan, both internal and external? What are the key communication tools that you're going to be using as part of your communications efforts? This would be your electronic communications, video, print, media relations, advertising, whatever you have identified as ways to reach and communicate. You're going to want to identify those tools that you have specified within this plan. What are the key messages that you're going to be communicating to your internal and external audiences? And what I found to be one of the more important ones, what are some of those critical perceptions to be addressed? When you go through this process, you're very likely going to uncover some misperceptions out there. And that can become part of your messaging and effort through this overall communications plan, is to address those misperceptions, but obviously do it in a very tactful and methodical way to hopefully move people's perceptions. Talked about the communications audit being the plan's foundation. Some of the stuff that you would have already put together, the process summary and key findings from the results in your report. It's okay to summarize that again, rehash that within the communications plan itself. And then along with that, the audit recommendations. What were the things that you had identified as the best way to move forward to achieve those goals and strategies? Your action plans. So when you have your findings and your goals and strategies, what are the actions plans that you're going to use to implement those strategies? And then how are you going to evaluate your progress? Conclusion, just have that last section in there. That's that all-encompassing wrap-up statement about your communications plan, very high level. And then two pieces that are important. I would dare say not necessary. I did include them in mine. Is a cost benefit analysis. If you have the ability to look at some of the initiatives that you're putting in place, particularly if it's going to involve purchase of new technology or launch of a new online resource that maybe you need to spend some money on. Make sure you incorporate cost benefit analysis where necessary. And then how are you going to monitor the plan's progress? One of the things that I did is the action plan portion. When I had spelled out specifically what I'm going to do, I took that action plan portion pulled it out separately into a secondary document and added a couple of columns to that plan to use as a progress monitoring area. So I would go in, and once I would start to implement some strategies for any of those plans, I would go in there and I would say, okay, this is underway. This is what I did. And it just became a running documentation of the implementation of what you've identified. So how long did this take? If you're going to do a do-it-yourself communications audit, I completed the entire process over 6 months. It was about 24 weeks. I budgeted my time in this way: the assessment of your current initiatives, holding the focus groups, doing your department situation analysis. That was about 5 weeks. After you have all of that information, took about another 5 weeks to go through it and look for those themes, look for the messaging, identify those misperceptions that needed to be addressed. So really take your time to dig into that. Creating and releasing your audit report, the presentation to the board, development of your communications plan, that was about 7 weeks. So once you've completed your data analysis, it was about 7 weeks from that point moving forward to finalize that communications plan. Then preparing the presentation of the communications plan, delivering that to the board, that was about another 3 weeks. Any modifications to the plan, because we've all been there. We present something, here's our draft plan, and you start to get more feedback. And so always build in some extra time to make any tweaks to that plan, solicited or unsolicited feedback that you receive. And then I began the implementation of that base communication plan in July. So it was about a 6-month process. So one of the things that I've tried to do, and I lean on this heavily because it really kind of keeps me grounded in the work and the importance of the work. Before the district created our department, just like many of your districts, when you're getting ready to go on the ballot, you'll do some research of your registered voters to kind of get a feel for how they think things are going. So when I first started with the district, I found the 2006 research that had been done leading up to the levy campaign that passed, that ultimately allowed our department to be created. And there were 4 key indicators that I pulled out of there that I continue to monitor. The percent of respondents saying the district was headed in the right direction back in 2006, before the department was formed, was only at 29.5%. The percent of respondents saying the district had gotten off track was at 57.3%. The percent saying the district was spending taxpayers' money effectively and responsibly, either an excellent, good, or fair rating, was at 67.4%. And the percent of respondents offering a positive assessment of the quality of education the district was providing was at 61%. I've tracked that data and pulled these 4 indicators out every time we have done research leading up to a ballot issue. The most recent one was done in 2018, leading up to a 2019 combined operating levy and bond issue. Percent saying the district was headed in the right direction at that time measured at 60.6%. That's a 31.1% increase from before the department formed. Percent saying the district had gotten off track, that dropped by 38.8% down to 18.5% pre-department to current. District spending taxpayers' money effectively, almost a double-digit increase there, going from 67.4 to 76.7%. And then positive assessment of the quality of education, 25% increase from 61% to 86%. This is a we contract this survey. This is a statistically valid random sample telephone poll of the community done by professional pollsters. So I put a lot of confidence in this data. And as I like to tell people, I don't know that our communications plan or our communications efforts can take full credit for what we're seeing here, but I can say without a doubt, we're not doing anything to screw it up. In that very last portion down there, in the 3-year period leading up to the formation of our communications department, the district had passed 3 ballot issues in 6 attempts. And since forming the department, we've passed 4 out of 5 ballot requests on the first attempt. And I was thinking about putting an asterisk there, and I didn't, but I'm going to give you the asterisk anyway. The reason that one didn't pass on the first attempt is because there was a board member at the time. This was years ago. He's gone. I'm comfortable saying it. There was a board member at the time who was adamant in putting an income tax issue on the ballot. That thing went down in flames compared to what our community was used to seeing on the ballot. It went down big time, and the polling showed that it probably didn't even have a chance to begin with. So overall, the efforts, I think, and outcomes have been pretty positive in using the communications audit as the foundation, and then continued research to help guide messaging and methodology. I talk about continuing research and ongoing research. I do something every year that I call my temperature check surveys. Every family in the district, I do half of the families a couple of months into the school year, and then the remaining families towards the end. Everybody has an opportunity to participate and weigh in. These are the quality indicators that I have for that. What are parents' perceptions or satisfaction with school communications on how their child is doing? So this is the school itself, the school building. The percent indicating satisfaction with overall district communications, the percent indicating satisfaction with quality of interactions they have with staff, whether it's by phone or email or in person, and then the percent giving a grade of A or B to schools, to their schools in the district. That comes off of the 2019 Phi Delta Kappa survey. PDK has regularly asked that question. And at the time, the latest that I could find was 2019. I don't know that they've asked that question during the pandemic, but PDK was 76% of respondents were giving an A or a B to their schools across the nation. 60% were giving their district an A or a B. So now if we look at how our families here in Westerville, and these aren't the only questions that we ask. I just, again, focus on these 4 to kind of take a look at communications in general. Pre-pandemic, I mean, we had 91.8% of parents responding, saying that they were satisfied with their building communications. 94.1% parents indicating they were satisfied with district communications, and 88.8% saying they were satisfied with their interactions with staff, and then the grades of A and B. And you can see that those numbers there for each of those areas. Not surprisingly, couple of years into a pandemic now, we're seeing some decreases in parent satisfaction. And I've not done any formal research in this regard. I've done some informal research and just asking some questions. One of the things that we're finding is people may be conflating decisions and basically decisions that we are communicating with communications itself. There have been decisions, as you know, we're in an environment now where there's just a lot of polarizing topics out there. People who are okay with masks, people who don't want masks, people who want this and people who don't want that. We're seeing, I think, when you communicate decisions that people disagree with, that conveys to dissatisfaction with communication. So this is some of the stuff that I'm using regularly to track our communications efforts. That is all I had. I wanted to try to leave some time for questions. And again, thanks for the opportunity to present.
If you have questions, you just want to raise your hand, we can do it that way, or if you're more comfortable putting it in the chat box, either way, we'll be sure that we direct Greg to those questions. So
I have a question.
Okay.
go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So you are the director of your department. So you conducted this audit yourself. What if, like in my case, I report to my superintendent and our department is, for the most part, 2 of us. Who would conduct the audit? Would it be our superintendent, or could I volunteer and say, I think this is something we need?
Yeah, I would definitely volunteer as the communications person to do that audit. And I'll take a step back too, because I think one of the reasons that this topic itself, a DIY audit, garnered some interest is because there's really a couple of schools of thought. One of those schools of thought is you should bring in an independent communications expert to do an audit so there's no bias. It can be an expensive proposition to contract with a company or an individual who is relying upon this type of work for their livelihood. So if you really want to try to control costs and you have a board and a superintendent who believes that you can do this job without being biased, and you're not afraid to hear the results, and the old adage, if you're afraid of the answer, don't ask the question. You can't be afraid to ask those questions during this audit. It's going to help your communications. But I do think you, as the individual responsible for communications, or one of the individuals responsible for communications, there's nothing wrong with proposing it to the superintendent as a process that would benefit the district.
Yeah, so my question is, in our current climate, I feel like if we do any sort of audit or surveying, even like our board is wrestling on a survey, it's going to be so skewed. So how long do you think we should try to wait to feel like, are we going to be a little bit normal and you might get some different sort of responses, or we just want to take the hit?
Yeah, that's a great question, Patrick. When I showed you those temperature check survey results that I do, I talked about what I'm referring to as the COVID slide. One of the things that I learned is there was an effort when I had first sent out, I mentioned that I do half of the parents, and it's randomly generated. I generate half of the parents randomly for the first semester, and then the half of the parents for the second semester. But this year, as the first one went out, there was an effort in Facebook of the Moms in the Know group to, here's the link, everybody, go out there and tell them what you're ticked off about. So that was the first time that anything like that ever happened, that I became aware of, at least. And I think the results showed that, they were trolling for dissidents. They found the dissidents, and the dissidents impacted the results. So I share that only because that survey that I do, the temperature check survey, it is not scientific. As you know, when you send out to like an all call like that, you're probably either going to get people that are really happy, you're probably going to get people who are really upset, and you're going to have to take that into consideration, because the folks that are just kind of ambiguous with how things are going and things are okay, and I'm not really upset about anything, they're probably not going to participate. If you were to do a contracted telephone poll with a professional pollster, I think you would be better able to put confidence in those results versus just an all call. I see Patrick had to take a call, so I'll connect with him later.
Hey Greg, when you did your focus groups, did you actually run them, or did you bring in a group?
I ran them. I did run them. And that's one of those areas where you talk about, having the confidence of others that you can run those groups without incorporating bias into the prompts that you ask or the notes that you take. I was fortunate to have that, because it was, again, part of it was I was the new guy, and I was charged with building this department from the ground up. So it would have been, number one, disingenuous and probably professionally stupid of me to try to incorporate bias and impact the results of the first big task that I was doing. But that's where I was saying, you could bring in, if you have the resources and want to take on that kind of an expense, you could bring in someone independent to do that. And again, there might be somebody within your community who has an affinity for the schools that has that experience and background and would be willing to run those groups for you.
Great content, Greg. I appreciate that. In a normal climate, what is generally the cadence or the time period you leave before each audit? Is it like every 5 years or every 2 years or 4 years?
Yeah, so in all honesty, I have not done a full audit since the first one, but I have done ongoing research to inform my messaging and to inform my strategy. So that initial audit created the foundation. I've developed communications plans on about a 3-year cycle. So what I would say is about every 3 years, if you're not doing it as part of a regular strategy annually to just kind of keep the feelers out there to hear how things are going, like I've been doing with my temperature check surveys, I would say every 3 years is probably a good opportunity to do some type of research to see if you need to shift messaging, if any current hot button topics have come to the forefront, and then you can address those as part of your plan.
Greg, we do have a question from Sarah Swan at Centerville. She was wondering, would you be willing to share the questions you asked on your temperature check survey? She says it's been a few years since she's done one and she would like to start doing them annually.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Okay.
the one thing that I would share is, remember, these are specific to our district. So you're going to see a couple of questions measuring people's awareness about certain initiatives. But yeah, I can definitely, rather than just try to throw them all out here, I'll share them.
Yeah,
with,
and
OHSPRA.
that would be great if you don't mind, Greg, sharing that in your presentation with Mary. She can get that out to the attendees if you don't mind.
Yep,
That'd be
absolutely.
great. Thank you very much. Do you have any other questions?
Greg, I have a question. So in your kind of temperature checks and your ongoing evaluation, what are some of the things that you've discovered that were cause for major change? I think we're very cyclical, and a lot of times we can get in the habit of, well, we did it last year, this way, so we can tweak it or update it, but we keep doing the same thing every year. So what are some things that have been kind of eye-opening to you in the temperature checks?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alicia. One of the things that we heard loud and clear from families, and it really dealt more at the building level than it did district level. One of the questions that we ask in those temperature check surveys is basically measures what information do they need that they haven't been getting from their schools. And I failed to mention, one of the things that I do afterwards is I do ask parents to identify their building that their oldest child attends. And then I break out these response by building and provide it to the principals every time as well, so they can see what their parents are saying. But the one thing that really came about, and it has kind of impacted the content that principals are sharing now, is parents, there was really a call for more information about what kids are learning. And this was before the national call to know what kids are learning, if you know what I mean. But they wanted to know what kids were learning and how could they help kids at home with their homework and their schoolwork. And that actually started coming out pre-pandemic. And I would say that probably during pandemic and remote learning and things like that, it became even more important. So the schools started to share more hands-on how to help your kids with homework and bring in some opportunities for parents to learn about other ways they can support their kids, particularly during virtual learning.
That's great. Thank you.
Hi, Greg. I wanted to say thanks for this presentation. I'm really excited to be here, but just wondering if you could share, if you do use any, but any tools or technologies that you've found helpful to leverage to help in this work.
Sure. So the temperature check surveys are just a simple Google form that I've developed and use. The distribution method to send out the temperature check survey is just our notification system. We use School Messenger. If you're familiar, if any of you are School Messenger, and really it doesn't matter what system you use, you usually have the ability to get an export of all of your parents' emails addresses out of a system. I use that, pull all of those into an Excel spreadsheet, and then just run a formula to do a random sort and divide that in half. And so the top half gets the opportunity during the first semester to answer. And I usually wait a couple of months into the school year because you want people to have some experience to be able to evaluate, right? You don't want to do it right at the beginning of the school year when everybody's happy because the kids are now out of the house and back in school. So you're going to give them an opportunity to have some experience with the schools. The first one I do is in November, and then I do one in April, just before the end of the school year. But it's really nothing special. The assessment is all done manually within Microsoft Excel. I don't know if that helps Aaron or not, but there's really no special tools that I'm using. I will say I'll have to give a plug for one tool that has become part of our communications arsenal here that really doesn't have to do with the audit process or anything, but it does have to do with an opportunity to engage and get feedback from people. We use a tool called Thought Exchange, and I think they've been at some OHSPRA conferences maybe, or you may have heard about them, but Thought Exchange, if you're familiar with the nominal group technique, which if you've ever been in a meeting where they put all of the chart paper up on the wall and they give you Post-it notes and everybody write down your ideas and they have categories across the chart paper and you put your Post-it notes on that chart paper and then they lump them into like categories and then you get little stickers, little dots, and you go around and put your stickers on the things that you agree with and really like that whole process is brought into the digital realm, and that's what Thought Exchange does. So it allows you to pose a question. It's always open-ended, and then people just respond. They type their answers to that prompt. And what's really neat is afterwards, after you've done your response to that prompt, you get to see what other people have responded, and you get to give it 1 to 5 stars. So if you really agree with something somebody said, 5 stars. You don't agree with it, 1 or 2 stars. And it keeps track of all of that data as well. And then you can run some reports to see what has come to the surface as far as those thoughts that gained a lot of traction. And then you can also, it's really kind of a slick tool that's part of it. It will generate an automatic public-facing website for you that allows people to drill down into the data. So it'll create charts and pie charts and bar charts. And if people want to drill down into more data, they can click into a particular area and it'll show them the responses. So Thought Exchange is probably what I would say the most recent tool that we've brought into our communications toolkit. And the engagement has been phenomenal. I'm sorry, I'm rambling on this one, but the engagement has been phenomenal. I mean, the last strategic plan update that we did, we probably had 100 or so people. That was before thought exchange. We've run thought exchanges where we've had 2,000, 3,000 people participate. You're meeting them on their own time, at their own schedule. You're not asking them to come to a building at a particular time on a particular date. So the engagement has just been phenomenal.
So Greg, if you had to build again from brand new, and you had the opportunity to bring in an intern, what tasks would you give them as you're getting rolling? I have kind of a weird opportunity right now where I've got an intern starting, and I don't want to overload them, but also it'd be great to have a second team member helping out right now.
Sure. Specific to the communications audit process or just communications in general?
The audit process, I think.
The audit process? I was hoping you'd say communications in general. So what I would say,
or if your recommendation would be communications in general. I mean, if I need to be spending more time on audit and there's tasks that would be best assigned to a college student, that could also, I have every single building in my district not only has their own Facebook, we also then have district-wide comms. So there's a lot of juggling going on and different audiences that happen.
I guess what I would say is it would depend on what strengths the student was bringing. If they have, I mean, if they're a communications, public relations major or marketing major, what I would probably use them for is some brainstorming with you in the planning process, maybe boots on the ground to go out and talk with folks to kind of frame what it is that they want to learn from the communications audit, because everybody kind of brings their own perspective. Once you hear that a communications audit is going to be done, there are people like your board of education members, your superintendent, maybe some of your executive directors. There may be things that they want to learn from this communications audit that you can incorporate into your focus group questions. So something that I wouldn't hesitate to have an intern do is to engage with those board members or executive level staff to find out if there was one thing or two things that you would hope to learn from a communications audit, what would it be? And then that can maybe help put some framework and guardrails around the types of questions that you're going to really want to make sure you ask. So it's a pre-audit audit of questions that you might want to ask and get to the bottom of.
Thank you. I know they're incredibly interested in literacy. So as of right now, her first assignments have to do with our district literacy committee. So
there you go.
We're rocking and rolling at this point.
Good.
Well, I see we are at about 1 minute after 1, so pretty darn perfect, Greg, in getting us right to 1 o'clock. I thank you so much for that great information from the all the questions. It sounds like this might be a topic that we might expand on at future OHSPRA PD opportunities. So hopefully we can call on you for your expertise at a later date as well. So thank you so much for sharing everything with us today, Greg. Really appreciate it.
Thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity and good to see you.
And I do see our friend Josh here. So I'm going to toss over to Crystal. And Crystal, for those who may not know Josh, introduce Josh to us. And I think he has a couple words for us. So thanks.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Crystal Davis. If you don't know me, I am the Director of Sponsorships and Partnerships for OHSPRA. And I am happy to introduce our sponsor for today's event. They have sponsored several of our Lunch and Learns. So we are so happy to have Josh Sauer with us. He's an educational sales consultant with Final Sight. He also has his APR. And before joining Final Sight, he spent several years working in school communications in Oklahoma. He also moonlighted as a communications consultant for public schools around the nation. So he has kind of a wide range of PR skills. He currently serves on the National School Public Relations Association Executive Board and is the former president of the Oklahoma School Public Relations Association. He's going to talk a little bit about Final Sight today. And Josh, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, and I'll make this really quick. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Thanks for the introduction, but I did have some bullet points here. If you hear my dogs barking in a moment, the mail person's about to come by. So those are my dogs on the right. As you said, I was involved in school PR, still involved in school PR, but now I'm part of the dark side, right? The vendor life, the ones that call you every day and ask for your business, right? But no, I try not to be like that. Really try to focus on building relationships, authentic, be helpful to people. And that's, to me, that's the best, most effective way to reach out to folks. So I do have a little bit of trivia, and Patrick Galloway is going to be the judge. I'm going to give away some gift cards to Starbucks. So in the chat, if you could answer this question, the person that is closest to the answer will get a gift card, and the person that's farthest from the answer will get a gift card. If there are any ties, if you guess it correctly, if there are any ties, you'll also get a gift card. So go ahead and answer. How many Ohio districts are currently in deployment with Final Site? Wow. Give it 30 more seconds.
I don't know how I'm supposed to judge this, Josh.
Just do your best.
Just do my best. I'm a little COVID brain fried over here. 10
more seconds. And I see someone is really close to the answer. The correct answer is not 47,674,000, Scott, but I wish it was. Now the correct answer is 42 districts that are currently in deployment. We have 120 plus districts in Ohio. So Ohio is the #1 Final Site state for school districts. So I'm really excited about that. So it looks like Christina, maybe. I'll let you be the judge, Patrick. These are the districts that are currently in deployment. A lot of you in here are actually on this list. So welcome to the family. And if you have any issues or concerns or anything, feel free to reach out to me regarding your deployment experience. I do want to celebrate our current clients who are active and live with us. Really appreciate you being on the Final Site train early. I have a lot of folks that reach out to me just wanting to kind of see what Final Site's about, right? They don't want a sales pitch. They just want to see like what it's about, what the buzz is about. And so if you do want one of these demos, I call them just for fun demos. My contact information is on the screen, but I'll also send an email after this with an invite to that demo day. And it's a group demo. It's not like it's one-on-one. So I'm happy to show you what Final Site's all about. Since we are talking about audits, and Greg, you did a great job with that presentation. We do have a kind of a website report card that gives you a high level overview of your website. It's not intended to be a complete diagnosis of everything you need to do, but it does give you some ideas and gives you a lot of ammunition potentially in building your budget for a website redesign, that ammunition that you can take to your executive team if you need to. And the last thing that I want to show you before I log out today is the website redesign playbook. Regardless of what vendor you're using, who you decide to go with, this is very, very helpful for you. It gives you ideas on what to think about, really following that RPI process that we all know of in school PR, that research, planning, implementation, evaluation. So I encourage you to download that. If you're not able to access these links, I will also include this in the email that I send after this is over. So that's all that I have for you.
Thank you,
I
Josh.
put the winners in the chat.
All right. So we have Liz and Christina. All right. Is that Liz Haywood?
Robbins.
Okay, Liz Robbins. I don't think there's a Haywood in here. I'm thinking of someone else. Sorry.
He was at 289.
Got it. Scott's disqualified, right? Did you disqualify him?
He disqualified himself because he lives on Pluto.
I love it though. Thanks for the humor, Scott. And thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks.
Great information. Carrie?
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it. And just to close out, Scott, Mr. Disqualified.
Yes.
You can redeem yourself with some information about our achievement awards.
I don't think I've ever been disqualified in such a public setting. Yeah, just a quick reminder for everybody on here, the OHSPRA Achievement Awards, the deadline was extended to January 31st. So if you still have not submitted entries and would like to, visit ohspra.org and check out the contests and awards page. You can see all the different categories and the details there. All the entries would just need to be submitted or postmarked by January 31st. And then for those, once you submit everything, invoices will go out after the deadline has passed. So we'll get in touch with you on that. But if you have any questions, feel free to email me. But definitely get out there. We've had a lot of people submit entries and would love to get some more. So bring on all the good work you guys are doing. Thanks.
And we're celebrating in person this year. Everybody knock on wood in your office. That's the plan. We're going to do these awards in person.
And we had a question in the chat from Aaron. Any recommendations from submitting a strong submission?
I think it depends on the category, but I think if it's a piece of work that you feel really good about, you know, definitely put it out there. Obviously, community reach and as far as if the media has touched on it, you know, those are all great. Things that have really benefited either people in your community or the students or staff are always good submissions. So yeah, I would think those would be great. And just highlighting the reach that whatever your submission did. And if that doesn't answer your question, if you have any more, you can email me and I'll be happy to walk you through it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if that is it, thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it. Greg, one more shout out. Thank you so much for that great information. Mary will get the presentation as well as those questions out to all of the attendees so you can take a look at that at leisure. And probably, I would imagine a lot of us will be kind of jumping on that bandwagon and using some of that information to do our own audit. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and hope to see everybody in April at our spring conference. Take care.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.